Welcome to Say It With Guitars. I'm your host, Pete Cornelius. Each episode, I'll be digging deep and getting to hang with some of Australia's finest guitar pickers, songwriters, producers, collectors, and makers. I look forward to bringing you these fun conversations and hope you enjoy Say It With Guitars.
Hey there, friends. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Hope you enjoyed our last chat with Dave Dobson. Looking forward to playing the show tomorrow for the Riverbend Blues event down in St Helens with Dave and his band, the Swamp Owls, Port Wine, Richard Steele as well. He's bringing his trio down. Also, Richard and I will be doing some shows later this year as well in a little thing we had last year called Get Together. It's going to be a hoot. Yeah, so keep an eye on the gig guide for those details. And yeah, thanks for listening to the recent single, Sick of This Town. I know that there's been some positive feedback and some people can surely relate to the story, so good on you. Thanks for checking it out. And I'm just signing off from the last few mixes right now, the last few songs. So yeah, hopefully we'll have product before you know it. So today's guest, Michael Carpenter. He's a very talented dude. He's been in the industry for a long time now. And yeah, he does it all, folks. He produces, records, makes your film clips. He'll do your graphics. And yeah, great singer-songwriter in his own right. So I had a great chat with Michael and hope you enjoy it. Before we crack into today's show, I'd like to shout out to our Season 3 sponsors, Tarrant Guitars and Top Shelf Guitars. The custom workshop of award-winning luthier Billy Tarrant on the northwest coast of Tasmania uses locally and internationally sourced solid tone woods to create a wide range of custom guitars, including acoustic, electric, lap steel guitars and specialty instruments, showcasing his passion for superior tone and structural integrity. Tassie's one-stop custom workshop for custom-made guitars, all guitar repairs and services. Visit tarrantguitars.net.au. Top Shelf Instruments specialise in used and vintage guitars, pedals and amps, shipping worldwide from Hobart, Tasmania. They love helping players land exceptional instruments for manageable dollars, and guitars from Japan hold a special place in their hearts. New old guitars hit the website almost daily, so head on over to the website for this week's weird and wonderful offerings. topshelfinstruments.com.au. All right, on with the conversation. I'd like to welcome to the podcast today of Say It With Guitars, Michael Carpenter. Michael, how you doing?
Hey Pete, how you going? It's great to be here. I'm a little bit starstruck. I love this podcast so much, and I dreamed of being on it so much, and so now I'm here. It's like I've got to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Well, dreams can come true, my friend. Here we are. Yeah, thanks for joining us. I know that we haven't really we've caught up once in the flesh, maybe twice, but once properly, and we got to hang out on stage a little and play some instruments on some unknown material. Well, unrehearsed anyway.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Material.
Had a fun little interaction, and yeah, it's good to have you on the show. And I'm sure you've got plenty to share, some knowledge and some stories and just a general hangout. So yeah, thanks for having us. Oh no, thanks for coming. I'm the one hosting.
It's great to be here. One of the things I love about the variety of different people you've had on the podcast is the fact that it covers a lot of territory, and it's not just related to guitar players, it's producers and songwriters and stuff like that. And I think that that's a really great, valid thing. And from my point of view, I touch on all those things. So, and being as old as I am and having been around as long as I am, I've got an opinion on pretty much everything. So off we go.
Off we go. Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, you know, there are lots of guitar nerdy podcasts and there are lots of audio related ones. Not so many, I guess there's a few singer-songwritery ones. But I thought, why not just cast the net wide and you just get, you know, all sorts of different people here, different experience levels. Like, it's been great to get some big names, and that definitely helps, you know, get the clicks, get the clickbait happening. But I think it's all about having all walks of life, all different degrees of experience, because everyone's got a different story to tell. So, I think I'm having a ball.
Yeah, you've actually touched on something that's pretty important, which is of all the musical instruments you can play, the guitar is kind of, it's portable and it's universal, and it's an easy thing to get into. It's even, if with the right amount of dedication, you can become quite good at it. But to become a real, expert at it, takes a lot of effort. But it's still the same instrument.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that makes it quite universal. Like, if you're a novice and you want to be a songwriter, you're not necessarily going to go over to your piano to do it. You're going to pick up a guitar and you can shove your MacBook in front of it and GarageBand, and all of a sudden you're making a record. It's not something you can always do with a drum kit or a piano or anything else like that. So I think the approach of looking at the guitar as being an everyman's instrument and a tool that you can use in so many different ways is a really important one to look at. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a worldwide instrument. It's not as though it's just really to do with one culture. It's like you can take a guitar anywhere in the world and someone has, it's not a new thing. So definitely there's and lots of different ways to do it. And they're just beautiful things to have around. As I'm looking at your screen right now, there's a few on the wall. So happy days.
They're everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yes, they're literally
Fantastic.
Everywhere. I love them so much.
So tell me about the space you're in at the moment. I can see lots of creative tools. I can see probably is it like an Atmos setup you've got there as well?
Yep. I've got a 7.1.4 setup in here. Yep. Wow. Okay, so Matt Fell and I, we ran Love Hurts Studios very successfully for 18 and a half years in Leichhardt. And 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now, it got bulldozed. And so we both had to find other situations. We knew it was coming at some point. I think Matt and I, I have to stress that Matt is one of my favourite people in the world, one of my best friends, and I love him dearly, and I miss him very much now that we're not in close proximity to each other. But when we moved into Love Hurts Studios, I think we expected to get 5 years out of it, and that we hoped we'd get 10. And we thought in our wildest dreams we wouldn't get 15 out of it, and we ended up getting closer to 20. And
wow.
And it's amazing. And when you think about, the fact that I'm 57 years old, so I moved into that place when I was 40. And I didn't have any kids, and now I'm in this space. And my oldest child is 20 years old, and Matt's gone through and had his kids as well, and stuff. It's been pretty significant. So when that all ended, I had the situation where I had a family, and I was recently separated, and me and the kids had talked about what to do. I didn't want to dive into building a new complex at my age. I figured that I might only have 10 or 15 years more worth, 10 or 15 years at the most probably worth of record making. I didn't think that people would still want to spend their money with me when I'm 80 years old. So it wasn't going to be wise for me to invest in 70 years old. My math wasn't so good there. Investing in a new build. And to be honest with you, when I first started things up with Matt, my favourite things were seeing people make records in houses. I love recording studios, but I spent a lot of time in recording studios, and I'd spent a lot of time in recording studios that didn't feel like very good creative spaces. I'd always had recording spaces in the houses that I'd lived in from about the age of 15 or 16. I'd always loved the idea of working in houses, and towards the end of the 90s, I got very into the Buddy Miller approach to making records and became obsessed with a bunch of photos that I saw of his house, and I always wanted to have a studio in a house that was just simple. So when Love Hurts finished, me and the kids had a big conversation about it, and we decided to just go and rent a bigger house. I have my kids here for half the week, And so we found this beautiful house here in Haberfield, and the owners were open to the idea of us doing what we were doing, and it's been a dream. It's been a great space. What I'm sitting in here is what is I guess a combination lounge and dining room, and it's been the best thing I ever did. Apart from Love Hurts, it's been the best place to stumble onto ever, and it's been a great place. And literally behind my back wall, behind me that you can see, Pete, there's a drum kit there, a back wall, and there's my bed. My bed is literally on the other side of that wall. So for teenage Michael Carpenter, all his dreams have finally come true.
Absolutely.
And
living,
it's great.
Eating, breathing and sleeping. Yep. In amongst it. That's great.
And it's just worked out that it's a great sounding space. Right in front of me here where my center speaker is, I've got a pair of Roy ribbon microphones. They're the room microphones. The room sound in here it's the best drum room I think I've ever recorded in, and it sounds incredible. The neighbours are super cool. I've done no treatment of anything. On the first day that I moved in here, I had to turn around a mix for a really particular client, and I didn't know how it was going to go. So I just set up some speakers and my computer, and this client is notoriously particular about things, and I spent 4 hours on the mix, sent it off to them, and they signed off on the first draft. At that point, I went, okay, we're just going to get to work.
Yeah.
And apart from my great time at Love Hurts, it's been the best creative space I've ever been in, and I'm certainly doing the best work of my career in this space. So
that's great. To have a space that not only invigorates you, like it's a fresh canvas, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also to have something that sounds good. Like I can hear it now, just you talking into the laptop. I can hear that the room's got a nice amount of reflection, but it's not like a grand hall that's going to have flutter echoes everywhere or just horrible, weird wave action. And it's a wonderful thing. And like you said, that whole Buddy Miller approach of having a good feeling space, like I think the feeling, it's one of those things where I think it's more vibe. You catch a vibe, and then it's going to sound great, right? So the actual quality of the recording, no one's listening for, super high fidelity if the music is crap. So I think if the music feels good, it's going to sound good. So
yeah, look,
I think feeling's a big part of it, eh?
Yeah, it plays into the aesthetic of what I've always tried to do as not only as a musician, but as a record producer. One of the things about this space is that it goes against all the rules of what studios are supposed to be. But there's one thing that it does encapsulate, and the reason we called it, I had the option of calling this Love Hurts Studios. Matt and I talked about it. And I said, just give me a month in this space to see how it felt. And it didn't feel like Love Hurts Studios. It felt like the house. And we call it the House Studio. And I love being able to say to people when they come to the door, welcome to the house. And people do walk in here and I know I've been on the other side of the microphone for a lot of years, and I know that recording studios have a certain level of expectation and anxiety and fear. And if there's one thing I can do with this space is cut through some of that so people can just come and be, then we are going to make better records. And there's been a tangible thing with new clients who've come in here and with existing clients where they like being in the house. They like that it's just a house. They come and sit in here and they walk out into the front porch and they sit in my lounge room and they go and sit in my backyard. And when they're in this space, they don't feel like it's a sacred space. It's just a creative space where they can just be. And it's it's been for me, like I said, all kind of corniness aside, it is really a dream come true for me to be able to produce in this space, because it does feel like an extension of the way that I like to make records and the way I like to be creative. I'm very much a cheerleader. Right. I'm very much trying to push positive experiences on people. And for me, if I can combine positive experiences with record making, which for me is the greatest thing that we can possibly do, then I'm doing a good thing for creative society in Australia or something like that. And it's been a happy time in here.
That's so good. And I suppose when dollar is tight at the moment, like all the bank rates, all the investment rate, or not investment rates, all the interest rates are just bonkers. So if you're hiring another brick and mortar studio, not only is it an extra amount of power, probably all your transport getting to and from, you probably got to do some sort of treatment. Then you've got insurance, like all that stuff adds up. And then the client has to aware a lot of that. And then the whole thing just bumps straight up as well. So if you can keep a pretty good realistic fee on your hourly rate without obviously cutting yourself short, it's everyone's winning really. Like, yeah, unless you've got unless someone really needs, a 64 channel Neve console and like a 2-inch Studer machine, you can do it anywhere. You can make a record anywhere. That's
and the funny thing about it is that I haven't had the Neve console, but I've certainly had plenty of times where I've had racks of Neves in my old studio at Love Hurts, and I had the 2-inch 24-track studio machine for years. And I guess as record producers, we get a sense of the nature of what our clients want and what they need, and none of them ever cared about that. I thought that they would care about that stuff a lot more than they actually did. All they really cared about was, am I a good dude and can I get the job done? And they'd go and listen to my show reel, and they didn't really care how I did. I used to be so concerned that I didn't have the right microphones and the right gear, but all people really want is the right producer. Like all that other stuff is it doesn't, it used to, like 15, 20 years ago, that stuff people were a bit more savvy about that sort of stuff. But now I think people just want results, and they're very aware of the fact that you can do great things with so much less than what they thought. One of the things I say to my students, because I lecture at JMC and at the Con, I talk to them regularly about the fact that the difference between now and 20 or 30 years ago is back then that very few people had the tools. Now everybody's got the same tools, so it really comes down to how good you are. And I think that that's a great leveler, the fact that are you creative enough to actually do something with this? Because we've all got the same stuff. Yeah. We've all got the same plugins. We've all got the same everything. But it comes down to whether me as a producer, with my ears and my brain and my creative impetus is still valid enough. And I think that that's a really important thing. And it translates over to guitars. I mean, it's, I've got as many good guitars as I've got shit guitars in this room, and I use them both equally because it comes down to whether you're good enough to pull sounds out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So what came first for you, mate? Were you a musician who got interested in making like other people's music and recording, or were you a bit of a gear guy for a while and then started playing guitar? Like how did that whole evolution begin for you?
I've always said that I think that I was a record producer before I even knew what that was. I think that my whole life, my first memories, like I was born in 1967, but my first real memory I can think of is being upset that the Beatles broke up in April of 1970. So I was 3 years old and already sad about it. So I must have some history. Some things were in there, I guess, from growing up in a family where uncles and aunties were already listening to music. And so for me, music has always been a companion, but not just, I didn't actually have any desperate desire to be a musician. I just loved music. And it just seemed like there was this particular point where I wanted to be part of that. And so I became a drummer. I got a drum kit when I was 8 years old, and it lasted about a week. And then mum and dad realised how loud it is, and I went in the garage until I was about 11. And then my older brother, who's, one of my best friends, and we're still incredibly close, he's 2 years older than me, and we hatched a plan that he'd play guitar and I'd play drums. And so we borrowed a guitar from my uncle. My uncle was a guitar maker. He used to make his own guitars. He was a carpenter by trade and an upholsterer, and so he made some beautiful guitars. So they were always just around. And so we borrowed one, and my elder brother gave up after a week. He was like, this is too hard. So to piss him off, I decided I would learn guitar. The deal was I was going to play drums and he was going to play guitar. But to show him how easy it is, I just started playing, and then he picked it up and we still play together. And so at that point, it just became a thing where, and within a year of that, I was playing bass in the school band. But it was never I wanted to be an incredible musician. I wanted to get better, but I just wanted to play. I wanted to be part of. I always refer to it, Pete, as the conversation or the currency of music. Like, I think that music is the greatest currency that we have. You know, it's a constant companion and gives so much to us. And if we can be part of that currency or that conversation, what a privilege that is. And that is never lost on me. There's no days where I'm tired of it. And so for me, the record making thing, you know, I got one of my rewards for doing well in the HSC was I got a 4-track. Before that, it was just two track machines and just bouncing between them. So I was already doing that at the age of, 14 or 15. So it was play instrument, get in a band, record the band. That's been my life. So there's been no kind of differentiation between one or the other. It's always been, I just wanted to record sounds, and the easiest way for me to record them was to be able to play them. And it just carried on from there. It went, and the usual story, it went 2-track, then a 4-track, and then an 8-track, and then a 16-track, and then a 16-track and an ADAT, and then 3 ADATs, and here we are all these years later.
Yeah, that's a great little journey. Do you have any copies of your early work, early recordings? Have you held on to any tapes?
I've got a sealed private Dropbox which has got all my 4 tracks that I've transferred over onto digital, and I've got them on Pro Tools session. And at some point, I'm going to go through. They're not good, Pete. Let's just say that they're not good. And it's. I say that, but it's charming to listen to, especially now as I've got a 15-year-old son who's a really great musician and doesn't even realise that he's a great musician because he's still into PS5 and soccer and basketball and stuff like that. Yep. At some point, he's going to realise he's going to want to take it seriously, and he's really talented. But it's funny because he's at the age that I was when I first started really making recordings that I thought were good, but they're not good.
Oh, good old hindsight. I know that I've got a few boxes full of old memories like that. Old, first recordings. I know that I actually released 50 cassettes of my first album to mates and family and stuff.
Amazing.
Dad had a R8 Fostex machine, like an 8-track quarter-inch machine.
Well, my first 16-track machine was an E16, which is the big brother of the R8.
Right, and that's half inch, is it, or is that still quarter inch?
Quarter inch. Sorry.
Wow.
Half inch. Yeah, it is half inch.
Yeah. Okay.
I've still got it.
Yeah.
It's in the garage. I had it in here archiving a project the other day.
Fantastic.
Anyway, carry on. All right.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying. Yeah, I did a similar thing for my first album. I played drums and bass and guitar and sang and played piano and stuff. And I think there was a few originals on there and a few covers. And I just sort of got the master tape done, and then just dubbed it. Just did it like one by one. Just sat there and just dubbed off, made some coin, and went, all right, cool. Let's do this. Let's make this the thing. And that was such a great learning curve to not only record or to learn the instrument, to learn all the songs, to play them, record them, mix it. All that whole process was just so exhilarating. It was all new and exciting, and you could put an effect on it. You could put it through, because Dad had these like rack mounted digital effects unit that had like a million crappy sounds. I didn't have one decent sound, but it had a million crappy sounds. So I'd put like flange on like a mix bus or just like weird shit like that. It was great fun. Yeah. So to have that at an early age.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I think one of the things that is really important too, I do see a lot of jaded people out there doing kind of what we do, but for me, I tapped into how that felt back then, and I talked to my dad about it a lot, about the fact, I'll be complaining about my son spending a lot of time in his room, and he said, "You think that's bad?" He said, You would wake up in the morning, you'd wake up before us, and you'd go down into your music room, and then we just wouldn't see you. You lived in our house, and we just wouldn't see you. You didn't need anything else. You just had that room and your records and your instruments, and that's just been your life forever. That's like the reason, what you were meant to be. So getting back to the original question, I just wanted to make records, and it was easier for me to make records if I could just play the instruments on them myself rather than having to wait. I'm pretty impatient with things, and so it just made sense for me to learn how to play things enough for me to do it. And I can remember the energy of those things back then, and it's no different to the work I was doing just before we started this podcast today, Pete. I still get really excited about that I get to do it, like, you know, and
that's wonderful.
I hope I never tire of it.
So do you still find yourself doing the bulk of the work or do you sort of try and get a few guns in every now and again to embellish parts, or do you do much like email session stuff with other people? Like, how does your workflow come to be when you're tracking with someone?
Well, generally because I think that, without sounding like a wanker when I say this, I think I'm a true multi-instrumentalist in the fact that I actually, you know, I've done 1,000 gigs as a drummer and probably 1,000 gigs as a guitar player, and, you know, 1,000 gigs as a bass player and a couple hundred gigs as a keyboard player. So I actually know how it feels to be in a band playing these things. So one of the things that is a selling point for me as a producer is the fact that people can come to me and I can just do all that stuff. And so generally on my records, I'm doing everything. So if we put a link to my show reel up on Spotify, on most of the things that are on there, I've played all of everything. The only things I can't really do are pedal steel and string stuff, and some keyboard things are beyond me. So I'll sometimes get a keyboard player in or send it off to them. But generally for most, or banjo, I'm okay at doing kind of simple sort of Matt Fell banjo where we're just playing a theme sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if it's a proper banjo part, I'm not doing that. So I think that's become one of the selling points of me as a producer, is the fact that because I'm an overall kind of guy, and I can mix and I can master and I can do the Atmos mix and I can do the artwork if needed. People who are looking for somebody who can make that process simple, that's been the majority of the work that I do. Over the last 2 years, I've actually started a project. I'll backtrack a little bit. Once we all opened up after COVID, I'd be back in Tamworth and see all my friends who I hadn't seen for a couple of years. And at the first Tamworth the first Tamworth we were allowed to do was in April instead of January. And
that's right.
Seeing all my friends, and they'd say, "I'd love to play on a record with you one day, but of course you don't need me to." And you know, there was a good mate of ours, Damien Caffarella, said that to me at one point, and it kind of stuck in my head. So last year I created a thing called Michael Carpenter and the Country Rock Collective. And the idea behind that was that I don't do anything. You know, I had little budget for every song, and I would just find my musician mates who I love very much and say,
cool.
And say, there's no brief, here's the track, do whatever you want. But the thing would be was play on it like you're playing on your own record. So don't think about what you think I might want. You just play on it. And I loved it. I loved it so much because I would just sit there. I'd do nothing. I'd write the song, send them a guide with a click track. I'll send them a guitar track and a finished vocal.
Yep.
And then whatever I got, the next person had to deal with. And it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful.
An absolute treat. Like things turning up in your inbox and just like putting it into your session and go, oh shit, that's a great idea, or that wasn't so good. Yeah. Most of the time would have been fantastic.
Yeah, and again, I didn't choose dickheads. I chose really good guys who I know and trust, and who have enough respect for me to be able to treat what I do with respect. And they had a lot of care, and they were very generous with their rates for me. And so over the last 18 months, probably we've released 5 singles from that project, and there's another few songs that I just need to get around to finishing. But it's an ongoing thing. It's not a project that was meant to be an album project or anything like that. It's just, here's a song. Mostly the thing that stopped it at the moment is I've just ran out of budget to be able to pay them, and I never want to disrespect these guys and by saying, can you do this for me from nothing? They probably would, but I never want people to feel disrespected. But in general with me, with session people, when I use them, it's a very simple process. You know, I know what it's like because I've been that guy as well. I do sessions where I'm the drummer or the bass player or the guitar player or Hammond player for other people. And so I just say to them, I'll send you a stem or stems, whatever they need, but usually it's just an MP3 usually or a WAV file back to the start of my session with a BPM, send it off, and then it comes back. I love that we can do stuff like that now, especially with I do a lot of work with Jai Perry Banks from the Banks Brothers, and he takes care of a lot of my pedal steel stuff, and it's just very simple with him. He's great. I play in a band with a guy, so he knows what I want. But one of the big revelations, I'm in a band with Jai Perry and Zane Banks, and Zane Banks is one of the greatest guitar players you're ever going to hear. And so we're just finishing off he's so good. We're just finishing off our fourth record. We haven't, including a bluegrass record that came out last year, and we haven't been in the same room since the first record. Now they only Jai drives past my house every day. They all live in the area, but we're just busy but we just don't get together. We don't need to. We know what we're trying to do, and we're really free and we trust each other. So Zane will send me a new song that he's written, and he'll give me some guidance if I need it. But generally I just walk over and play drums and send it back to him, and he'll give me the thumbs up, and then I put a bass track down and send it off to him, and it's been great. It's been really easy.
That's so good when you can have people like that you trust, but they trust you, and the whole thing is just this sort of good feeling. And like you said, if it was an issue, you could probably just catch up with each other somewhere down the line. But if they're just living down the road and they're happy to, put the kids to bed and then go and do a few tracks and bingo, that's it.
And even with Jai did a steel track for me last night, and he sent me through two takes and said, let me know what you think. I'm going to go home and take care of family business, but I'll be back later on. So I had to listen to it, and it was a rare occurrence where it wasn't quite what I wanted. So I came back to him and said, you can probably go a little bit harder in these specific bits or whatever. And so he said at 11 o'clock last night, I got two more takes in. They were beautiful. I did a comp, sent it off to the client. They happened to be awake at 11:45 last night, signed off on it straight away, and off we go. It's beautiful. I love it. The idea of creativity. I mean, we're all grown-ups and we've all got commitments and we've all got kids and lives and wives and partners and all that sort of stuff. So if we can find a way of making that not a big deal, then again, it breaks down this door of creativity. I'm really big on this idea of opening up doors of creativity. So if you can remove the fact that it doesn't need to be with the guy sitting right next to me, he can just do it and I can trust him to do it, then off you go.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be in a sound treated, isolated space. Like for instance, you could get a pedal steel track, just a DI track, and then you could reamp it, or you could internally use your amp modelers or Sims or whatever like that. And so then therefore there doesn't have to be any noise. Like if you're plugging directly into a interface,
exactly,
the kids can be asleep. It can be like whatever time of day you want it to be. And there's no issues with that kind of. So it's so convenient. There's no excuse convenient to not make records.
Yeah. Look, and we've got our patterns down right. So when he asks for feedback on tones and stuff like that, and so the tracks. And I've been working with Jai now for about 8 or 9 years as my steel guy, and we've really worked out a system, and certainly the tracks that he sends me and Zane sends me now too, they sound great. They sound really, really good. And we're just using amp sims generally. I think we're using Amplitude mostly, and mostly it's just a Fender Deluxe or a Fender Twin thing. And we know we've got the option, if I don't like what they send me, of them sending me just a clean DI and I can reamp here. But it very rarely comes to that. Like what I got sent yesterday was beautiful sounding pedal steel. It was great. Didn't have to do anything. Put it in the track. Perfect. And I didn't even compress it or anything like that when I put the rough mix together. I just sent it off as it was after I did the comp. So it's great. We're at that level now where it does come back to how creative I are, and it's awesome.
Yeah. But it's not only how creative the player is. I think it's how creative the engineer, or if there's editing to do, especially if you're working with click tracks and grids and stuff like that, you can sort of you can move things around as you can be an arranger as well as a editor and engineer and all that sort of stuff. So there's so much room for manipulating audio now.
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier on, it's it really just does come down to how creative you are and how good you are, and it's funny because I come from an analog background, and you know the sort of music that I like. I'm very much into old records and the classic 50s, 60s, 70s era of record making. So even though I've got access to all the options in the world and all multi-tracks and playlists and alternate takes and stuff like that, I'm the most decisive person you're ever going to meet. And so I approach it still very much in an old school way. Like, that take's good. Can you do one better? No, then that's the take. Oh, should we do an option just in case? No, let's just get on with it. And let's build on solid things rather than the wishy-washy thing of, we can always come back later and revisit. I very, very rarely ever backtrack. Even when I'm using amp sims, I'll very much, whatever sound I've got up, that's pretty much me. I'm just going to print it anyway and commit to it. I very rarely, I would say 1 out of 1,000 guitar tracks, I'd go back and tweak the amp setting beyond what I had when I was doing the tracking of it, So I think that it's important for the youngies out there to not get bogged down in options. I think it's too easy for us to have infinite options. And I think that the ability to be decisive, all of the top guys that I've worked with, and I have worked with a bunch of people, it's not just all me all the time in here, but they are super decisive and super clear, and they make a decision and then we move on to the next thing, and they just don't have the time to just keep on going back over their tracks, and it's
and generally
thing to carry forward.
I think you have to trust, when you're in the heat of the moment too, when you are creating, say, a guitar part for a particular song or whatever, your instinct is going to tell you at the time whether it's good or not. Not think, this will do. It's always like, no, I'll tweak this, because otherwise you can't perform your part properly. If you're thinking, this sound isn't quite really what I'm into, but it'll do, that never happens either. You have to commit and really trust your gut when it comes to tone, because like you said, no one's got time to go and reamp and change the mid knob by about half a tone.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other things too that people never talk about enough, and I'm always a bit surprised that people don't talk about it more, is with our Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, playlist world, it's actually way more instinctive than it ever used to be. I did grow up in the analog world, and if you did a drum track and it was great, but you screwed up a fill, then you were going back from the front, It was always one of those things where you didn't have the option to necessarily, you could do some drop-ins, but drop-ins on analog machines were always a bit of a risk. Yeah. The great thing about it now is when I'm doing a drum track, for example, I'll get my head around the shape of the song and I'll walk over and I'll record on the first take, and then I'll record a second more refined take, and then by the third take I'm pretty much playing it the way that I am. But often the first take has got stuff that I talk myself out of that I shouldn't have talked myself out of, and we can still be instinctive. So as creatives now, we can lean into the fact that we can change anything we want, and we can actually be super instinctive. And like for me, when I do my own records, I'm a solo artist as well. I never record my vocals the way I record everybody else's vocals. I sit here with my microphone and I literally sing it, and I just drop it in, and I drop it in until I get it right. And then I move on, and I haven't got playlists, and it's very instinctive because I know what I can do. And I generally am not going to sing it better in 5 takes time. I know what I'm trying to say as the writer and the producer. I know what I'm trying to do, and I've recorded it I've tried things the other way, and it's just easy for me to just go drop in, drop in, drop in, drop in, and the vocal's done in 15 minutes and we can get on with our life. So the ability to be instinctive, and often that'll be the first thing that'll go down that's a keeper. I'll put down a guide guitar and then I'll do the vocal. The great thing about that is I'm building the whole track with a finished vocal on, and that changes the way you approach everything.
No, you're right, absolutely.
So the ability to be
it's just a guide, and
and
it's pretty uninspiring to play to a this will do kind of track, isn't it? Like, you definitely need, if you've got the ability to put down a keeper, like a final thing in the early days, that's gold.
Yeah, it's great. And like I said, so the thing I love most about recording these days is the fact that, good musicians have great instincts in terms of guitar choices or amp choices or pedal choices or how we're going to mic it up. And if you've got good guys who are experienced, that stuff doesn't take very long to manifest. And again, if you know that you're not burning up a whole bunch of studio time going down wrong paths, it allows you to be creative. It's always going to come down to that same point with me, Pete. Is this a way that we can be more creative? So if we can get our rhythm guitar stuff done super quickly, it means the weird 3-part harmony glockenspiel part that we wanted to experiment with later on, nobody's going to feel bad about spending 20 minutes doing that. So it's one of the things that I think about in here all the time. If we can get those little victories out of the way, then it takes the pressure off the time restrictions, and people can actually lean into, well, this thing's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. So instinct is a really important thing.
Yep, absolutely, and it is a great thing to experiment, but it's one of those things where you have to be super careful and not lose track of the original idea and the essence of the song that you've written or that the artist has written. So you got to always like do a little check. It's like, hang on a minute, where are we? How are we looking? Have we lost the focus? It's
one of those things. From a producer's point of view, I've got my little notebook here, and pretty much every song I will have written down notes on what our direction is, even if it's just a starting point. So that's not supposed to be a straitjacket, but it's supposed to be an opportunity to give us some sort of framework, because there's a million ways I can make any song. I can push anything from punk to bluegrass to country to orchestral or anything in between. So the artist needs to give me some sort of framework, and we just need to keep on going, hey, remember how we said it was going to be this? Why are we doing 27 tracks of glockenspiel?
Yeah.
So I think having that, like I said, it doesn't have to be a straitjacket. We don't have to be locked into that, but it does mean we can stay focused. And when I do have guitar players come into, or drummers or whatever coming in, it means that we can say, well, we're looking for this sort of sound, this sort of approach. And when they start going down another path, we can just bring them back and go, that's actually not what we're trying to do. So it's just focus. But good players, man, good players being allowed to be instinctive that's a real true joy in what we do. And that includes me. Like, I'm a pretty good player at this point. So being able to just dive into it and know that you can just lean into your instinct is a beautiful thing.
Yep. And having the trust, and because that's probably why people want to come to the house, is because they know what you can do. They know that you're capable, and you're going to bring your flavour. You're not going to just be like giving the artist every little, not questioning anything. It'd be just like, oh, cool. So that's definitely a thing that I think comes with time, is to curate your own style, your own approach, and your own flaws. Like they're part of your colour palette, is the things that you can't do so well, and that the things that you do well probably get a bit more airtime than the things you don't do so well. But I think what I'm trying to say is it's you have to follow your gut in so many aspects of being creative, and not only in the creative side, but you have to follow your gut in the business side of things. Like, by the sound of it, you sort of ran your own business for a long time, and you're still making music, and you're still in the industry. So, and that to itself, I think, in this current climate, in terms of financial situations, that's a merit to itself. So obviously put a lot of time and effort and thinking into not only the music, but also the whole day-to-day thing as well. Like you were saying, so you lecture as well at the local university. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Look, I've had a go at everything, Pete. I'm a video maker, so I've made 300 music videos. I'm a sideman. I run a thing called the Album Show, which is a series of tribute shows that we brought up over the last 4 years, where we play. We've now built it up, and we're now moving up into small theatres with that. We've now built. Over a time when we've had the global pandemic and stuff like that, we've managed to build about 25 different shows that have involved about 34 different musicians over the last 4.5 years. I used to write for Audio Technology magazine. I was a writer for Audio Technology magazine. I've done master classes and guest lectures, and I'm a photographer. I'm a graphic designer, and I think that you touched on something really important there. I think that beyond what I do in this room as a record producer or as a musician, 2 or 3 times a week I'm having the vocational conversation, with people going, how do you do music full time? Because they look at what I do as me doing music full time, which of course it is. But I always talk about the fact that if I just wanted to be a record producer, then it's not enough money for me to be able to do it. So if you can find a way of diversifying a little bit just outside the box that you think you want to be in, but just enough that it still feeds into the same thing, you start to realize that your processes around taking a photo or making a video or writing a song or delivering a lecture are no different to making a record. It all leans into the same process. There's an endpoint that you need to have an understanding of. There's a timeline of when you need to get this thing finished. And then there's X amount of resources that you've got at your disposal to do it. That's no different if you're writing a song or if you're collaborating with somebody or if you're making a record or if you're doing a video shoot or a graphic design, or even like I do corporate videos. And, it always starts with the same question. How do we want this to end up? And then they come back, and from that you've got your brief, and from that you can work out your budgets and your timelines and your personnel and whether you need to call on externals or whatever. So, I'm there's a lot of things I'm pretty proud of. I'm proud of the fact that I've been doing this full time since 1998, but I've been making records since 1991. And the fact that all this stuff is all I do. Like, I don't go and work in a shop. Nothing wrong with working in a shop, but I don't. I either make records, or I go to uni and talk to people about making records, or I go and play in bands, which is the greatest thing ever, playing great records, or I write for Audio Technology magazine about making great records. It's all part of the same thing. Or I take photos that it's got to be part of the great records that we've just made. You know what I'm talking about. So anybody who's listening to this who's just a guitar dude, or dudette, or whatever we call the female form of dudes, I think that don't get too fixated on this is all I'm going to do. I think that if you can diversify and be versatile, and most importantly, and this is probably the big thing, I mean, you and I have met a couple of times, and I like to think that I'm a pretty good guy. People like working with me because I make their lives easier. I don't cause them angst. If I can find a way of facilitating whatever it is that they want to do in their creative world, and I can do it at a price point that's going to make sense for them. In fact, the whole video making thing just came because I got tired of people saying to me, "Oh, Michael, if we could just find somebody who made videos who was as easy to work with as you are." I went, well, should we just start making videos? And so we started to invest and started to do it. I like the fact that generally I make people's life easier, and if it keeps me afloat, then I'm very happy with all the different things that I do. And that's gone on to now. I've been a CMAA board member for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm a senior board member, and we've got major initiatives we're just about to push out to try and make our country music community a little bit happier, and build a level of community. If that's stuff that, with my level of experience, inverted commas, that I can help make things better, then I'm really happy to be doing it. And it's still fun for me, Pete. I just love it.
Yeah. That's so good. And the whole diversity thing, I think you've really hit the nail on the head, not only in terms of staying afloat financially, but like mentally, just throwing yourself into different scenarios, getting out of the studio, going to a live gig, living in the moment, or just sort of different creative tools to sort of help new skills. And all those new skills can correlate. They're all related. So
absolutely.
everything's going to help.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And look, there's no denying that me being a drummer has made me a better rhythm guitar player. That me being good at running the album show, and I think I run a pretty good thing where all my musicians are pretty happy and well catered, well taken care of, and certainly valued from my point of view, makes me a better sideman for other people, or a better advisor. I had a meeting with a guy today who's about to do a big project, and he came in. I'm going to be his MD, but today he just wanted to help. He wanted some advice on how to run the thing. All of these things feed into each other, and look, there's no denying that. For example, let's just have a little snapshot of the last week or so. So last week I mixed an album, played drums on a whole bunch of things for another album, did a video shoot for Sydney Uni, and then on Friday night I played my History of British Rock 60s and 70s show, where we played 33 of the greatest British rock songs ever to 400 or 500 people, a great crowd. Then the next night we played a Tom Petty show where I was playing rhythm guitar and keyboards, and that fed into a much smaller crowd. But then on Monday I was back at uni teaching about Dolby Atmos, and then that afternoon I came and did 2 Dolby Atmos mixes in here, and then I did a live album mix the next day. And then that sort of diversity means that you're aware of how everybody feels when they're on either side of the microphone, when they're managing their own projects. So I'm respectful of timelines and budgets and, how long it's going to take to get through things. So, I think that anything that you can do out there as a creative to add to your skill set just makes you better at all of the things, and I'm a better drummer because I'm a guitar player, and I'm a better record producer because I'm a singer and I've got my own projects, all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. They're all part of the same bag, and if you can,
absolutely,
if you can be good at the majority of them, obviously, you got to start somewhere with some things, but that's what. That's why it's nice to upskill and just to meet new people. Yeah, like I said, different circles. And you definitely have a better approach. Like if I think I saw on a drum video, like a Steve Jordan drum video once, that he was talking to Levon Helm, and Levon's like talking about how he loves to play mandolin and sing and play drums because he's a better mandolin player from playing drums. And that kind of like when I was young and I saw that, I was like, that makes so much sense. Like you sort of get to know your place or your part as a player in an ensemble if you have experience on all the things.
And that's one of the greatest compliments I get for people who go back and listen through my show reel and stuff like that is they say it sounds like a band. And one of the things that I'm very, very fortunate, and I've created this situation, is that, like I said, I know what it's like to be the drummer in a band. I was in a drummer in a band 2 weeks ago, and this Saturday night I'm a drummer in a band as well. I'm playing, Ringo in a Beatles show this week. It's so I know what it's like to be those guys. So you just bring that mindset, and the more you do it, the more it's easy for you to disconnect from. Okay, I'm not the bass player now. I'm the rhythm guitar player. I'm the Keith in this situation, and then Ronnie's coming in a few minutes, or I'm the Ben Montench in this situation. It does. But it's just experience. And at this point, and people always say, whenever I get a compliment, people say, wow, you're really good at this. And I go, well, actually, I'm just pretty old. I've just been doing it for a long, long time. I've been doing gigs now for 42 years, and I've never been a one instrument guy. I've always, every year it's been jumping between instruments. So my skill set, and people are always like, well, what's your main instrument? And it's like, I really don't have one. I don't have a preference. When I'm not playing one for a while, I miss it. I just like playing. So. Yeah.
That's great. Is there an instrument you've picked up recently? Like not necessarily in that rhythm section sort of backline, but is there anything a little bit spicy you've picked up? Like any like harmonium or anything a bit sort of bizarre that you've had to really sink your teeth into? Like I know that you said you're not playing steel because that's just a mindfuck.
No. And listening to Ollie Thorpe's podcast this morning and hearing you and him talk about it didn't make me want to do it anymore either. And I've got joy for that. I think it was a funny thing a couple of years ago. Me and my son were talking about things, and I told him I had a dream where I woke up and I was panicked. It was one of those I'm dying dreams. I went, and in the dream, I was like, I'm so sad because I won't ever get my body in shape, and I won't ever be able to I won't ever be a good piano player. And I was relating this. That was what was in my dream. And I was relating it to him, and in his typical, at the time, he was 13 years old. He said, you can fix both of those things. You can just kind of lose some weight, go to gym, and practice the piano. You've got a piano right here. And so about 2 years, I've always been like, I've played Hammond on a lot of records because I've got a Hammond and a Leslie, and I know how to make that work. And I'm from the Benmont Tench School of Hammond organ playing, where generally people don't need a lot of lines. They just need that sound coming in the chorus.
Nice swell.
And I've been doing that for a long, long time, but I've never really considered myself a piano player. So a couple of years ago, I set myself a task that I would do a gig where I was the piano player. So I've been practicing a fair bit, and I did, and somehow it's just ended up now people just expect that I can play piano, but I'm much better than I was, but I still got a long way to go. So for me, I would like to be considered a proper piano player. So that's the thing I practice more than anything. But my problem, and you're in the same situation, Pete, just being able to stay afloat takes a lot of effort in terms of making sure that you can get to the next payable job. Yeah. I would love to have a faster right foot as a drummer. I would love to be I get frustrated as a slide guitar player. Like, I'm a good slide guitar player, but I'm frustrated that I just play the same 4 licks. I'd like to learn 2 more licks, but that would require me spending 15 minutes, and I just don't have, I've got to get my body in shape because I'm a man of a certain age now, and I was quite big, and I need to get that. So I need to go to gym, and I need to do that 3 or 4 times a week. And, and I want to be a better piano player, and I want to be a better bass player, and I want to be, a better engineer, and, I want to be a better board member, and there's only so many 15-minute things I can set aside in a day before my day is already maxed out. So, look, I don't beat myself up about that the way that I used to, but when there's an opportunity for me to sit here and have 5 minutes where I just get my finger on a piano, or I'll make sure that there's a slide guitar next to me, and I'll have a 5-minute window where something's bouncing out or I'm waiting for a response to something. I'll go and put on Derek Trucks, and I'll go, what did he just do there? And I'll find out what that is. And you do enough of that over a long period of time. It's like saving money, People make mistakes by going, I'm going to put aside, $200 a week. You'd be better off putting aside $20 a week for 2 years. That's going to work. $200 a week may not actually be able to work. So if you can just chip away at things,
that's a great idea.
That's a better way of doing it. I read a quote once. It's always stuck with me. There was a famous cello player, a concert cello player, and they were interviewing him. He's 90 years old, and he said, sorry, he was being interviewed. He said, sorry, I'm running a little bit late. I was practicing. And they went, you're regarded as the greatest cello player in the history of the world. Why do you keep on practicing? And he went, I feel like I'm just starting to get good. and it is this whole misnomer that we get. Like, I'm 57, like I said, that we have some sort of expiry date. Like, my hands may not be as fast as what they were when I was 18 years old, but I'm 5,000% better musician than I've ever been now. And I feel like I'm just starting to get good at a lot of these things. Yeah.
But that's such a natural thing, though, I think, like, as a profession, the instrument itself, I guess you get better at all the little quirks and the nuances and stuff like that. And the more musical you become, the less your body is able to go as fast or as hard or as long or whatever as you once were. So it's just kind of like, it's this evil balance, isn't it, between, ability in the brain ability versus the physical, I suppose. Yeah, it's this sort of like there's this tipping point, right?
Yeah, but there is the other side of that coin too. Like, for me, I never had aspirations to be, a Dave Weckl drummer or, a John Bonham drummer. For me, the currency for me was always just pop music, whether that's pop rock or pop soul or pop country or whatever. I was always, goes back to the first question that you asked me, I always just liked pop music. I just liked, Stevie Wonder and Jackson Brown and ABBA and the Beatles and Wings and then Peter Gabriel and Genesis. And, I always liked and respected the 4-minute pop form. And I just want to be able to play that better. And so, as we get older, I'm much better at doing gigs on any instrument that I play. Like, I understand my gears better. I understand what guitars work and how to tune them better. I understand how to make tones better. I understand how to play in an ensemble really, really well. I understand the dynamic of egos and personalities and when to step back and when to step forward. I know how to run a band better now than I ever did, and all those meat and potatoes things that have got nothing to do with being fast or knowing how to play really, really super fancy chords, but so I've been playing Ringo in Beatles bands now for almost 20 years, and the day I did my first one of those gigs was like the greatest day ever. But I do the gig heaps better now than I did then because I understand what it takes to do that gig, because that's just experience. So this whole thing of we can only be good when we're young is such a misnomer. I think that if we can find situations where we can continue to refine our art. So for me, I'm in the perfect situation. People pay me money to come and be the band on their records, and every time I do it, I get just a little bit better at doing that and more creative. And from a guitar point of view, for example, people will bring me in references and I don't know how to do the things that they want me to do, so I have to go and learn. And as a guy who's only supposed to be a few years away from retiring, that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, that is absolutely. Yeah, it's a wonderful time to make music and to just be involved in the arts and just, especially if your kids are playing as well. Like I'm looking forward to those years coming up on my end. I know the kids are into music. They're not really devoting any valuable time to it yet, but they've definitely got some skills and they love it. So I look forward to that side of things as well.
Yeah, it's such a thing. My son's predominantly a drummer, but obviously there's always been guitars around the house. And so when he was really young, I taught him, G, D, E minor, C, A minor, I think A7. But he doesn't practice or anything like that. He's not a guitar player. But the other day he walked in here. I'm just going to grab a guitar. He walked in here and picked up a guitar, and I said, can you still play? And he ran through, and he's got a really good sense of rhythm. And so I just yelled out chords to him, and he was all over all of it. And then I just noodled and just kind of went. And he went, oh, yeah, Dad, I've been meaning to ask you, can you teach me about the blues? And so unexpectedly on a Monday night here at 9:00 with the fireplace going, when he was supposed to be doing his homework, we started playing Robert Johnson records, and I taught him how to do... And all of a sudden, he'll walk in, he's gone home to his mother now, but he'll walk in next week and he will have just practiced that. And you're doing it with your kids. It's amazing. Yeah. It's unreal.
Yeah.
And then they'll turn around here and say, don't put any pressure on me, Dad. So.
I can't wait for them to start correcting me. No, it goes this way, Dad. Haven't you been listening?
Yeah, that's right. I got shocked the other day when my son came in and said, Dad, one of my favourite songs is Feels Like the First Time by Foreigner. And I'm like, how does a 15-year-old boy in 2024 hear that? And then his sister went, we know that song through Pitch Perfect. And I'm like, oh, man, the way that these kids are getting their music. But, both of my kids, they've had music, obviously I've played a lot of music around them for their whole lives. And so I'd like to think they've got pretty good grounding around things.
Yeah, so. I'm sure they have. I'm sure they've got a good influence. All right, Michael, well, we might wrap it up there, mate. Is there any projects or any shows or anything like that you really want to tell the audience about, or where's a good place for someone to to come and spend some time with you in the house if they want to be a potential client?
Look, the easiest way to find me, I always say that I'm surprised more of my ex-girlfriends aren't trying to find me. I'm the easiest man in the world to find. But I'm easy. You can find me on Facebook. I've got a website, but that generally just pushes you off to Spotify and YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. But I'm pretty easy to find. The house studio has got a Facebook and an Instagram page, and I've got a lot of different projects. I've got me and the Banks Brothers, Michael Carpenter and the Banks Brothers, and Michael Carpenter and the CRC, the Country Rock Collective, and the album show, which is what I do most weekends. So I'm pretty easy to find. So if anybody out there wants to drop me a line or tell me what they think, I'm more just disappointed that we got to this point we didn't get to really talk about guitars. So,
Well, there's always more. I'd like to sort of cut one piece off at a time. Otherwise, it'll be
fair enough.
And my kids will be home from school any minute, and they're just going to ruin this nice little vibe we've got here. So
no worries. Yeah, so I'm easy to find, and I love to hear from anybody. And certainly, Pete, what you're doing is a great thing. Putting this stuff out there in the world, it's very important that we creatives have got a place that we can talk about this stuff. It's important to us. So thank you so much for this amazing podcast.
Pleasure, man. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time, and we'll do it again some other time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for listening, folks, to another episode of Say It With Guitars. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it around to your mates, leave a good review, and hopefully we'll see you next time.